Good evening, welcome. We're going to continue our share in Masechta Sotah. As mentioned, it's a blot a day. Yesterday we almost finished the blot, and tonight we're going to endeavor to actually finish a complete blot, which is number 3, Daf Gimel. Yesterday we discussed several things, why the Masechta of Sotah is here, particularly in this place in the Talmud, in Gemara. We also discussed the concept that you have to have two witnesses that saw her, that he warned her in front of, and that saw her, according to one opinion, that saw her violating the warning not to be secluded with a particular individual. And however, when it comes to her behaving immorally, even one witness should be enough. The very end of Daf Beis, Amud Beis, just going to finish off what the Gemara said here because it takes us into the beginning of today's Daf. Amar Shlakish. Shlakish said, what is this term of kinui? When a husband warns, what's kinui mean? A mekane or a makne. It's something which brings anger or jealousy between her and others. The Gemara is going to explain, according to the Shlakish, what it means, bringing anger. How does it bring anger? He holds, according to the Shlakish, it seems that a person could warn his wife on his own, which means only one witness. He's the witness, and he says, I don't want you to be secluded with a particular individual. Why? How do you have this proof? Because the rest of the world, the rest of the city, let's say, don't know that he warned his wife. The Amri, and they're talking and they're saying, "My dekama, what happened to Kabadla, that she's separating herself from us? Till now, this woman was involved. She was talking to people, she was hanging out with people, and all of a sudden, they don't know that she was warned because it wasn't private. Her husband just told her, I don't want you hanging out with this person. And people see that she's not going out as much. But also, they're starting to speak angrily against her. They're saying, what happened to her? Why is she separating from everyone? But Rav Yemar, but Rav Yemar says, no. The word kina, anger, is not anger between her and the rest of the world. It's anger between the two of them, between the husband and the wife. Between him and her. So you see that according to Rav Yemar, you have to have two witnesses to warn the wife, because what happens is two witnesses heard it. There's 3 people that know about it, the husband and 2 witnesses, and they're talking. There's no secret once 3 people know. The kuli yadi, everyone knows about it, the cunning law. And he is the one that is going to create anger among her, because he's telling her, I suspect you, I don't trust you, and so on and so forth. Alma Kasavri, so you see that both of these opinions, both Rav Shlakish and Rav Yemar, both hold the usr the kanis, that it's prohibited. We asked the question earlier, is it a positive thing or a negative thing for a person to warn their wife? But it seems from Rav Shlakish and from Rav Yemar, both of them, that it's not a good idea to do. It's actually forbidden. Why? Because it says that you have to love your fellow, right? Avos Yisrael. And if he's causing anger, whether it's to others or to her, that shouldn't be allowed. And the one that says that it is allowed to warn the wife, what does warning mean? Rav Nachman Yitzchak answers, it means simply that he's warning her. It doesn't mean anger or jealousy. It's a warning. He's warning her, don't be with them, or else you're going to have to be taken to Yerushalayim and drinking the waters and so on. We also have a pasuk where you see the word kinoi also means warning. Now we have an interesting thing about the concept of Sotah. Tanya, we looked at a brayso. A person, in this case a woman, is committing a sin in secrecy. No one knows about it. She's going and doing the wrong thing. But Hashem announces it publicly, because the husband is going to decide, he wants to warn her, and the people hear about it. She goes to Yerushalayim and so on and so forth. It starts off in secret, but in the end everyone finds out. Shenemar, that a spirit of kina will come upon him, upon the husband, and he'll decide that he wants to warn her, that everyone knows about it. The term avera means announcement. She's doing a sin, a transgression, but in Hebrew, transgression also means announcement. You have a term, the pasuk says, and it means announcing. So now what she started in private becomes public. It's been announced. Another teaching about Sotah, Shlakish Eimer, Shlakish says, we all learned this in Pasuk Gani, a person doesn't do an Avera unless some spirit of folly, some silliness comes into them. Because in natural state, you don't want to transgress, you don't want to do any Averas. Shenemar, how do we learn this? Because it says, Ish ish kisista ishta. It could say, kisata. She turned off from the regular way. Sista, this extra shin, is the idea of shtus. Sista ksiv, it says an extra shin, which teaches you that it's a spirit of folly that got into her, which is causing her to behave in such a way. I'm just going to say the Rashis by heart, or some of them, because of the lack of time. But normally, the Gemara has to be learned with Rashi. Why did, in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael, they asked the following question. Why did Torah believe one witness by a Sotah that if one witness comes along and says, I saw that she went with someone in private and was there long enough to commit an immoral act, why do we believe one witness? Everywhere else in Torah, you need two witnesses. You don't believe just one person. Because there is a basis for it. He warned her in front of two witnesses. She secluded her in front of two witnesses. And there's one witness that comes along and says, she behaved immorally. So by this stage already, there's enough basis to believe only one witness. Papa told Abaye, you want to tell me that the warning happened after the stira and the tumah. So you can't tell me that tumah came later. Came later after you already had kinoi and you had stira. Now you had tumah. Tumah happened in the end. It already happened. So how could you say that because you already have these two steps, then now you believe one witness? So if you want to tell me that avar means past tense, because the pasuk says avar, that means it happened already, I'll bring you another pasuk where the Torah says regarding the condition that Moshe Rabbeinu made with Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain, he said that we'll let you have a portion out of Eretz Yisrael as long as you go and fight the war with the Jewish people, and then you'll come back. And all those that went will go over. It also says past tense, but it means future. So in our case also it means future. Same thing you should say here, that it means past, and obviously you can't. When it says over there, it says clearly, based on the context of the rest of the pasuk, that there's a war going on, and afterwards you're going to return. So clearly, the avar over there means past. But over here, if you want to tell me that the way it's written, the avar means afterwards. Obviously, over here, the warning happened before, because she already secluded and she was already impure, if that's a word, then why does he have to warn her? There's no point in warning anymore. So clearly, you have to look at the context of the pasuk, and the other in this case also means over here it means after the fact. The Torah is telling you the story, what happened. He warned her, and then she was secluded and behaved immoral. Rabbi Yishmael taught another teaching. A person is not going to warn his wife, and I'll remind everyone what the Gemara says, that we don't do it these days, but a person doesn't warn their wife unless a spirit got into them, an idea. Because the pasuk says it comes from a place of ruach. Now, which ruach is it? My ruach. Rabbanan say it's an impure spirit that got into his mind, and that's why he's doing it. If Ashi says no, it's a ruach tara. And the Gemara says it seems that it makes sense that it's according to the person that says it's a ruach tara. Why? The Tanya, because we learned that a person warning his wife is a permissible thing. You don't have to. Even Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Akiva argues with him and he says, no, it's a chayva. If he has suspicion that she's behaving immorally, he needs to warn her. Now, if you want to tell me that it's a ruach tuma, if you want to tell me it's a good spirit, a pure spirit that got into him, so it makes sense that he wants to warn his wife. Does it make sense that if it's a ruach tuma, that we should have permission and even an opinion that it's required to bring this impure ruach upon you and go warn the wife? Doesn't make sense. So therefore the Gemara concludes that it must mean a ruach tara. Gufa, we learned before, we mentioned this brisa, now we're going to go through this whole brisa because there's a lot more arguments between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yishmael says things that are written are optional, and Rabbi Akiva says they're required. We're going to bring three examples. When it talks about a kohen that can't become impure, go to a cemetery and so on, there's exceptions. Close relatives and an unmarried sister. So lo yitama, to her, he's allowed to. According to Rabbi Yishmael, this is optional. In other words, if he wants to, he could go to her funeral and so on, but he doesn't have to. Rabbi Akiva says he's required to, although he's a kohen. Another example, it says regarding a idolatrous slave, Eved Kanani, we say that a person the master should work them constantly. You should never set them free. Rishus, Rabbi Shmuel says it's optional. If you want to send them free, you could. You don't have to. A yid you have to keep for 6 years, and afterwards you have to let him go. By an idolatrous slave, you keep them forever. No, he says chayva, you're required to keep them. So the Papa tells Abaye, and another opinion says it's not Papa Abaye, but it's Rav Sharshia to Rava. He says, let's say that in the entire Torah, they argue like this. Rabbi Shmuel feels that mitzvahs are optional. It's a question about Averis, but it's optional. And Rabbi Akiva says it's a requirement. So he told him back, whether it's Abaye or Rava, said, really, they're arguing over here about the psukim. Of course, he believes every mitzvah is a requirement. It's not optional. In these three cases, he's arguing, what does the pasuk mean? Rabbi Akiva says it's a requirement. My time, Rabbi Shmuel. What's the reason of Rabbi Shmuel? He holds according to this Tana. Let's understand this. The pasuk tells us in one place, don't hate your friend in your heart, which means it's forbidden to hate. I would think, in this case, a husband has suspicion about his wife being unfaithful. You can't cause any hatred, so I can't say anything. So therefore, Rabbi Shmuel says, in this case, Torah says this is an exception, and if you want, you're allowed to go and warn her, although it's going to bring some kind of hatred or animosity and so on. Rabbi Akiva says, one second, it says kinoi twice in this psukim. It says once in the first part and once again in the second part. Whenever it says 2 times, it's teaching that there's a chayv here, it's a requirement. Therefore, it is required. Rabbi Shmuel, what's he going to say about the extra kinoi? Maybe indeed it means that it's a requirement. Rabbi Akiva, because you're already repeating regarding tuma, you say nitma, therefore we say again, it's the style of the Torah speaking, because you're repetitive about being tamei, so you also mentioned twice kinui, but it's not to tell you that it is a requirement. The Kitan of Rabbi Yishmael, because we learned from the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael, this is consistent with his teaching. Anytime Torah repeats something, it's only because of a chiddush that's there. And the extra word here is because it works, because you're already saying something in a repetition, so you're finishing off in the same way. Next argument between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael was lo yitama rishus. Rabbi Yishmael said it's optional. If a kohen wants to become tamei, take care of his sister, God forbid's funeral, and so on, he's allowed to. Rabbi Akiva mercheva is required to. It's not optional. My time, Rabbi Yishmael. So he brings a pasuk to back it up. Rabbi Yishmael says the pasuk in Parshas Emer says that you shouldn't become impure. The kohenim can't go to a cemetery and so on. It's tzricha l'michtav lo yitama. Why do you have to say lo yitama, and because it says lo yitama, so we learn from here that it is optional. Rabbi Akiva, he says he learns it out from the words ki'im l'sheirei. I don't need an extra pasuk to tell you lo yitama, because Rabbi Shmuel said that the pasuk told us that a kohen can't become tamei to people, so you have to have a special pasuk to tell you that for her it's an exception, and other relatives as well. But Rabbi Akiva says, I don't need that. It already says im l'sheirei to his relatives, the very close relatives. So it's obvious that an unmarried sister he's allowed to become impure to her. If so, why do I need a special teaching lo yitama? That's extra. And again, if it says something extra, it's l'chayva to teach her that it's a requirement that he must become impure, must deal with her burial and so on. Rabbi Shmuel, what's he going to do with that extra lo yitama? He's going to say lo mitama ve'mitama le'ivoreha. If there's a case where he says like this: if it's her whole body, she passed away, then he's allowed to become tummy to her. But if, let's say, she got ill and she lost a limb or something, heaven forbid, then he's not allowed to become impure. There's certain impurities that are applied even to one limb. He's not allowed to become impure to that limb of the sister. What's Rabbi Akiva going to do with that? How does he learn about Evodel? Rabbi Akiva says, it says lo yitama. It's 2 words. You could just say lo, it would be enough. Yitama lamali. Shami enough. From here I learned that the extra word yitama is telling you about evareha, about her other limbs, that he's not allowed to become impure to them. Rabbi Shmuel, I did the cause of law, cause of yitama. Rabbi Shmuel says, because you're already saying law, again, this is the stylistic way of writing. There's a chiddush here, and because you say law, the proper way to say it is lo yitama. Tanya, Rabbi Shmuel, the same thing called parshas. Anytime Torah says something twice, it's because of chiddush that's here. And once you say it twice, the rest of the pasuk has the proper finish, and we also say it twice. We have one more example where they argue if it's a chayv or a rishus, and that is regarding slaves. The pasuk in Vayikra says that a person, if he has an idolatrous slave, you should never set them free. Right? They should work for you forever. Rishus, it's optional. It means you're allowed to. Divrei Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Kiva says it's a chayv. My time Rabbi Yishmael, I did the chayv because it says you should not let, when they came into Eretz Yisrael, there's 7 nations there, and Torah said you have to kill all of them. They could run away, but they're not allowed to live there with you. Because you said that now I would think that I can't have such a slave. In order to make it permissible, if there's some other nation, not one of the 7, that came to Israel, and he married a Canaanite woman, and they have a child. So Taylor's coming to tell you, you could buy him for a slave. I would think not, because technically she's a Canaanist. So he's telling you it goes according to the father. From them you could buy. I would think, what if it's the other way around, that there's a Canaanite who went and married one of the 7 nations, one of the other nations of the world, which would be allowed. For those that are born in your land. So Rabbi Yishmael learns from here, no, this means that it's optional. You have a certain pasuk. The pasuk is telling you that in a case where someone from outside of Eretz Yisrael married a woman from Eretz Yisrael and they're a Canaanite, that you're allowed to have them as a slave. Rabbi Kiva learns it from the pasuk says mehem tiknu, from them you could buy. The mehem tiknu refers to others. Such a case where someone from out of Eretz Yisrael married a woman from Eretz Yisrael, a Canaanite. Why do you need the word le'ilam ham tavedu? He says that l'chayva. That's coming to tell you again. It's a repetitive thing. I don't need that. I have another place to learn it from. I can learn it from mehem tiknu, and because it says le'ilam ham tavedu, it's teaching me that it's a requirement. You're not allowed to let an idolatrous slave go free. Rabbi Yishmael says bohem v'lei ba'achechem. It says bohem, but bohem I'm coming to tell you that you're allowed to. Just real quick, Torah is very, very particular how we treat slaves, any slave. But when it comes to a Jewish slave, being that it's a brother, we have a higher level of how we have to treat them. You can't treat yourself better than them. If you eat certain types of food, they have to have the same types of foods. If you have a softer pillow, they have to have a softer pillow, and so on. So it says this only applies to Jews. But idolatrous slaves, you don't have to have that. You don't have that restriction. That's what Rabbi Yishmael says, and not to teach you about a slave that came from out of town and married a Canaanite woman. He learns it from the end of the pasuk, because the pasuk says, he learns that later on in the pasuk says that you should not be mean or make them work too hard. Yishmael says, no, it's not an extra word. It says so it says also bahem. The same teaching we keep on saying that they taught in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael. Any parsha which is repeated is only because of the thing that's new there, and in this case, that's how we repeat in the sefer the word bahem. Okay, another piece of Gemara. Oh, we're doing good on time. Rabbi Chisda said, if there is adultery in the home, that is like a worm that's eating up a sesame, where it eats up from the inside. You can't tell until it's already too late. And the same applies here, that a woman, adulterous woman, she consumes all of her husband's possessions, and it's only noticeable once it's too late. Rabbi Chisda said, tukva bebesa, anger in the house, it's the same thing. It's like a worm in a sesame. Both of these things, by anger and adultery, it's referring specifically to a woman. But when it comes to a man who has anger or so on, not that it's a good thing, it's compared to worshiping idols and so on, but it doesn't carry that same destruction to the home, because he's not at home as much. He's not the Akeres Habayis. Now another teaching from Rabbi Chisda, and initially the Shechina rested by each and every individual. Hashem is going among you. Once the Yidden sinned in immoral, illicit relations and so on, the Shechina left them. There shouldn't be any immoral behavior among you, and he returned from behind you. Any person that does a mitzvah in this world, the mitzvah goes in front of him in the world to come and protects him or helps him in judgment. Anyone that transgresses an avera in this world, it goes in front of him, and it's by his day of judgment, the sin is standing there to prosecute it. Which is a pasuk referring to this concept that the avera ends up destructing him even in the world to come. It's not just that it goes ahead of you and it destructs you or prosecutes you, but the sin is tied to you like a dog. It doesn't leave you. And the wife of Potiphar, it says he didn't listen to her, to lie with her and to be with her. Why did the double lashon lying and being? To lie with her in this world, meaning he doesn't want to be with her. And liyais ima refers to the world to come, because he understood that it'll have an implication in Elam Haba. Over there, we looked at before that technically, logically, bedin, I would have thought, we're going back to the discussion about having two witnesses, if you need two witnesses for the warning, for the seclusion, and for the tumah. So logic would tell us the follows, that if the very first pair of witnesses was telling you what? That she was warning her, which does not really forbid her permanently, because technically she can have a warning. If she doesn't seclude, she'll be fine. And we said, for that minor witness, for that minor stage, you need two witnesses. The second stage, that if she's going to be secluded, then she won't be able to be with her husband anymore. It's a permanent prohibition, meaning she's gone. Obviously, logic says that you have to have two witnesses for that as well. If you have two witnesses for the first, which is not as strong, for sure for the second one. So the pasuk is coming to tell you, don't go according to your logic, but for the second stage, one witness is enough. Especially if they say that if the witness says that she was impure or immoral. Kol sheyeshba, anything that's there, any type of witness. The Gemara says, 1 second, I have a kal v'chemer to the first edus. If the second edus, which we said is very extreme, because if two witnesses saw her being secluded, she can't be with her husband anymore until she drinks. So now I would say 1 second. Then the first witness, maybe one witness is enough. The pasuk, when it talks about her, it says he found in her. It's not about this topic. It's about in general, if a person is divorcing the wife because of something immoral, it says he found in her something that's immoral. Davar. And later, when it talks about the idea of witnesses to establish something, it says the word davar. So we compare davar by immoral and davar by in general, which is monetary and so on. Just like over there, it's two witnesses means witness davar means two. You have to have two witnesses to establish a fact. Similar over here, you have to have two. But logic would dictate otherwise. Hi, michimotza was davar nafka. Why this I learned from michimotza was davar. Mi ba nafka. For the word ba, you learn it out from matzah was davar. I learned it out from ba. Ba v'lei b'kinui. Ba v'lei b'stira. Specifically about the impurity is one witness, but not regarding seclusion, not regarding warning. For those you have to have two. So the Gemara says, no, we're going to learn this brayso slightly different. He's saying in a way of hachinami. How do you know that if there was a tumah without any warning, and there was, in other words, the husband didn't suspect her, he didn't warn her, and he didn't tell her not to be secluded, no one saw her being secluded, one witness comes along and says that she was immoral with a particular individual, how do you know that you believe her? It says later that based on two witnesses or three, it'll be established. Ma davar, just like the word davar over there means two witnesses. Also over here, you have to have two witnesses. So with one witness alone, it's not enough to have any capital punishment or to have her. There's an issue, but if she wasn't warned before, one witness is not going to do any good here or damage here to forbid her from her husband. And with that, we finished Daf Gimel. Start Ma'ariv shortly. Don't forget Yalav Yaveh. All those that are watching online, you are welcome to ask questions. Put it in the comments. Think if you like it, like, share, subscribe. See you tomorrow. Mitzvah Hashem.